Good afternoon. Thanks everyone for having me here, and for Megan for asking me. Thanks, Miss Kathy. As Michelle said, I attend church here at Tomoka, Palm Bay, but if you don't know me, my name is Kaylee Baker, and I am a wife and new mom. Neither of those titles came quickly or easily for me. One just required a man to open up his eyes a little bit wider, so typical, right? But the latter, that literally took blood, sweat, and tears. I'm a crier. My journey to motherhood was hard, but not as hard as some, I realize. And so when Megan asked me to speak here today, I said yes without hesitation. I was super honored. But as I've tried to prepare, the devil's really kind of been in my ear and telling me that my story isn't worthy of today and isn't worthy of sharing with you guys, because to be honest, I know women that have had a harder time than me becoming a mom, hoping and praying to become a mom. But my testimony and my story and my journey is not about me, it's about God. So here I go. Does anyone believe that a person's personality is reflective of their birth order? I do, and I am the classic eldest child. I am super controlling. I am inflexible. We can be overachievers. We tend to take charge. Sounds lovely. I promise we have some good traits too. But that is me to a T. So in work and life in general, I usually get what I want because I work hard, and I'm strategic, and I don't quit. If I want something done right or fast enough, I usually do it myself. But with that being said, I've always been overwhelmingly grateful for my life, my blessings. I know that everything I have has flowed through God's hands. Any minor obstacle or difficulty or heartbreak that I have experienced, also allowed by Him. Yet for most of my life, I always thought that I was in control. I was under the naive belief that I could fix or change anything. Sorry. And even though I was super grateful, right, and recognized that God is the giver of all these things that I have, I always felt like I was the one here doing the work. That if something needed fixing, if something needed doing or achieving, that I did that. And that's crazy, right? Giving myself the glory and not God. I think sometimes we see Him like He's one of us, like He's no greater than you or me. In one of the sessions that you'll be able to watch after the event, Jackie Hill Perry talks about holiness, how God is distinctive and nothing can be compared to Him. That we've got to know Him. I'm sorry guys, I'm like totally out of my element here. I don't know what happened. Sorry. I'm out of it, guys. A little nervous too, so forgive me. So back to Jackie Hill Perry. She's a speaker that spoke at IF, and you'll have access to her content. But anywho, she talks about holiness, how God's distinctive and that nothing can be compared to Him. That we've got to behold Him to know Him. And not until we know Him can we trust Him. And then only then when we trust Him can we really know the peace that He gives. So back to me, little Miss Control Freak, going through life thinking that I'm handling it all. But then cue my infertility. And I lost all control. For the first time in my life, I learned true surrender, that God's timing is perfect, and that even if, He's still good. So when my husband Tim and I got married, I was 27 and still living with my parents. In the South, that made me an old maid. The fact that my little sisters were married and had children before me, that just cemented it. So as soon as we got married, the when are you gonna have babies question started. Tim is 9 years older than I am, and I've always wanted a ton of kids, so we figured that we better get started. We went a year of trying to enjoy marriage and not preventing it, and nothing happened. You know, my sisters look at their husbands and baby. So my doctor said, well, sometimes, you know, people need a little bit of help. So we took some meds, and that didn't work. They just made me super sick. So then we had to go see a fertility specialist. And after a few months of cycle tracking and blood work and samples and scans and dye tests, we were told that without ART, or assisted reproductive technology, that we only had a 3% chance of having children naturally. Unexplained infertility, they called it. Was it a shock? Yes. The cost of it all, daunting, absolutely. But the most troublesome thing was that I couldn't help but think that if I was made by God, how could he make me unable to have children? How could I be formed in my mother's womb and not be able to have a child of my own? My body endured 2 IUIs, which, if you ever want to feel like a cow, just go through artificial insemination. I had 2 egg retrieval surgeries, a mock embryo transfer, and then 2 embryo transfers. I'm not going to bore you with all the medical terminology, but basically it means we started with a few pills and that didn't work, and took a couple more pills and did a few shots and that didn't work, and then more pills and more shots and that didn't work, and so more pills and more shots and that didn't work, and you get the picture. And all those pills and shots just led to more bad egg retrievals, more unviable embryos, and more testing. More embryo transfers and more blood work and more money and more poking and more prodding, more raging hormones and more pain, more negative pregnancy tests and more unanswered prayers, all resulting in more heartbreak. I was tough though, and knew that God had a purpose for my pain. Before each embryo transfer, we would pray with our fertility doctors and nurses. I would pray these big, powerful prayers that the ultimate healer and giver of life would give our embryos life. I knew that this was the stage for God to perform a miracle and do big things. After all, how many fertility patients attribute science to God's perfect design of our creation? How many are praying with their fertility doctors before they have these procedures? And how many people stay faithful after years of heartbreak, month after month? Me. And I just knew that God was going to reward me with a baby, and he did not. What I always thought after each failed procedure, but he's always working for my good and his glory, right? Well, they missed plenty of opportunities for that, I always thought. But do you hear that? I thought God missed an opportunity. Like, my type A self was in control of giving God a stage, like I somehow ever had the slightest bit of control in his plan. After 3 years of fertility treatments, we were done. We just couldn't do it anymore. Honestly, at that point, I had stopped praying about all things Baker baby. I figured that God knew the desires of my heart and that I just couldn't beg him anymore. I actually started praying that God remove the desire for a child from my heart. Shortly after, I was telling my friend Caitlin about this, and she reminded me that I had to keep praying for baby Baker. 1 Thessalonians 5:18 says to pray without ceasing. Romans 12:12 says to be faithful in prayer. In Luke 18, Jesus teaches his disciples to pray and not give up. And in Matthew 7:7, it says, ask and it shall be given to you. Ladies, I'm telling you here today, if God isn't answering you right now, if you feel like he's silent, please keep asking him. When I got back to trusting God with the desires of my heart, heeding Romans 12:12 and Matthew 7:7, trusting our Heavenly Father with my deepest desire, completely surrendering my baby to him, and yes, I said my baby, the one I didn't have yet, the one that I didn't know. When I surrendered it to him, he gave me a peace that only he can offer. I've been very open about our infertility because I think it's something that needs to be talked about. Infertility is like this secret club that everyone knows about and no one talks about. Talking about it brings awareness. It makes men and women not feel so ashamed or alone. It increases advocacy for better insurance coverage and more research. But two, and most importantly, because I want people to know that infertility isn't God's mistake and it's not evidence of his absence. And not just infertility, but all of our ailments and struggles. Our bodies are not perfect because after Adam and Eve, we were all born into this world of sin and we're broken. We are infertile, we get cancer, we develop dementia, we lose our sight, and our hearts fail. We have addictions and failures and conditions because our bodies are just weak and deteriorating. But still, God is right there with us. He's sustaining us, comforting us, loving us, and providing for us. You're probably like me and know that though, right? Through our infertility journey, I knew that God had a plan and I knew that he loved me. I knew he wasn't forsaking me, but I was still angry and sad and confused. Have you ever been angry with God, heartbroken that he didn't answer your prayer the way that you wanted? In Psalm 13:16, David cries, how long, O Lord, will you forget me? Even Jesus felt these emotions in John 11. We see him grieve over the death of his friend Lazarus. There's a lot of grieving with IVF. The doctors are able to take my eggs and Tim's sperm, and they form these cells after they put them together. And you wait and see if they start to grow. The cells continue to multiply. But then they stop growing. And then you grieve the ones that stopped growing. And then you find out which ones are viable, and you grieve the ones that aren't. And then you go for your embryo transfer, which is weird, because you have an embryo inside of you, so are you pregnant or are you not? You save the petri dish that the embryo was growing in, and the pic of this microscopic little cluster of cells that you pray just attaches and continues to grow in utero, and then it doesn't. And you grieve this confusing loss of hope, of potential, and love that you had for just this little cluster of cells. I've heard people say in times of grief that they just felt empty, but I swear I could physically feel the emptiness of my womb. These emotions that we experience themselves are not sinful, but what we do with them can be. One of my favorite verses that helped sustain me through our infertility journey was 2 Corinthians 12:9. But he said unto me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is perfected in weakness. Therefore, I will gladly boast all the more about my weakness, so that Christ's power may reside in me. I've always thought that that verse was beautiful, but it wasn't until I lived it, until God's grace had to be sufficient for me. Until his power was perfected in my weakness, that I could boast about my infertility, about my childlessness, and about my broken body, because that was when Christ's power truly resided in me. In the spring of 2020, Tim and I decided to pursue adoption. When we made that decision, it just felt right. To us, fertility treatments never felt good. It was never something that we looked forward to, or we were excited about, or we wanted to do. And it wasn't like an ethics thing or a political thing, just it never felt right for us. To be honest, before we started pursuing fertility treatments, we had talked about which path to take. And I don't know why we chose fertility treatments. I do, it was all part of God's perfect plan, but we'll get there. So right as we were signing up with our adoption consultant, the world stopped due to COVID. But women were still experiencing crisis pregnancies, and babies were still being born, so our adoption journey continued. Honestly, we naively thought that adoption would be easier than fertility treatments, but we were just getting off one roller coaster to get on another. Adoption is the most complex and painfully heartbreaking, but beautifully redemptive process. It wrecked me, it wrecked us in more ways than I have time to explain here today. But anyhow, we started the process, which is to do a home study and make a profile book. The profile book gets presented to expectant moms for them to look through and choose a family for their baby. We get through those steps with ease, and we soon start receiving situations to present to, which situations are like info about a birth mom and her child and their situation. So everyone kept telling us, oh, y'all are great, you'll get chosen so quickly, this is gonna happen in no time. but all we just kept hearing were no's. We would get these emails saying, the chosen family has been notified, and that clearly wasn't us. So what happened? I think I'm in control again. And I decide that our profile book needs to be updated after just a few short weeks. Better pictures, that'll do it. I remember our adoption consultant telling me, Kaylee, it's not about the pictures. God already knows the mama that will choose you in Tim. He already knows your baby, and there isn't a picture that could disrupt his plan. Y'all? I was rolling my eyes the whole time this chick was saying this to me. It kind of gets my blood boiling now thinking about it. Like, right, then why do we have to make the book to begin with? That's what I remember thinking anyhow. So not too long after that, we get a call from a lawyer that we'd been chosen. The pictures were in, I knew. However, after days of emotional and heartbreaking churn, the situation fell through as she decided to go with another family. And a few weeks later, we were chosen again. But yet again, that situation fell through as well. This second time, though, was especially hard, mostly because our families had to ride that roller coaster with us. We had decided, Tim and I, that we wouldn't say anything to our family and friends until we knew that a situation was for real, until it was final. This specific one, we got a call on a Thursday and anticipated having a baby by Saturday. So we needed help, of course, and in order to welcome a baby in 72 hours, you need your family. So with this particular case, they too felt the high hopes and sinking despair of a failed match. After this second failed match, yet again, my need and misplaced confidence of being in control took over, and I had to take action. It was taking too long. I had to do something to make this happen faster. So I made an adoption website. I poured into this little URL that would lead us to Baby Baker. We asked our friends to share on social media, and hundreds did just that. And guess what? It worked. It reached an expectant mom, and after seeing us and reading about us, she told us that she would like us to adopt her baby. We were skeptical, of course, con artists scam hopeful adoptive parents every day. But after meeting with this mom, it was clear that that's not what was happening. So over the next few months, we attended doctor's appointments with this woman, we met her daughter, we were her emotional support, and walked with her step by step through this pregnancy. But she would go weeks without communication and avoid the lawyer and any talk about paperwork or documentation. So we proceeded with the sole intent of just loving her like Jesus would, trying to help steer her towards God and supporting her through the pregnancy with no expectation or hope of the outcome. We were constantly warned by our consultant and lawyer that this was unlikely to be successful based on some of her behaviors. And so we were encouraged to continue to present to other situations that would likely be more successful. And so we did, and we continued to get no's. When we present, we would write these letters to these expectant moms. You sit with the little info that you have and you pour your heart out on paper. Within minutes, you see yourself building a life with her child. You're making promises to a woman that you've never met, committing to loving her child and honoring her for the rest of your life. And then, 48 hours later, usually, you get that dreaded email that she's selected another family, and it's this tiny little heartbreak all over again. Then one day, we got an email about this expectant mom due any day and needing our letter within a few hours. I didn't even talk to Tim about it. Why? I thought it's just going to be another no. So I wrote our letter, the only letter that we didn't write together, and I sent it to our consultant to be presented to the mom. I told him later that night when he got home from football practice, it was a fleeting thought, just a casual FYI, this is what I did, and we didn't talk about it any further that night. The next day, my phone rang. I'm a crier. And when I looked at it, I saw that it was our adoption consultant. Weird, I thought. Wonder what this is about. The letter that I had written from the previous day didn't even cross my mind until I heard her voice. Kaylee, she said. Sorry. You and Tim have been chosen by Mama Y. Congratulations. Now, I can't describe what that feels like. Maybe like being told you're pregnant, I don't know. But I got all gussied up and headed over to Heritage High School to tell Tim right before his football game that he was gonna be a daddy. The next few days, we went into overdrive, preparing to bring our daughter home any day. But she wasn't quite ready, and days turned into a few more weeks. Those weeks were a whirlwind of excitement, but as exciting as that was, nothing is guaranteed, and that was constantly in the back of our minds. It's really complex being a hopeful adoptive parent. It's not a celebration that a child doesn't get to stay with their mom and dad. Adoption is not God's perfect design for the family. However, we do live in a broken world, and we serve a loving and redemptive Father. And our prayer was always that if Mama Y continued with her adoption plan, that she do so with us. Thanksgiving night last November, we got a call that she was going into labor, and a precious baby girl was born that Friday morning. We jumped in the car and headed to South Florida where the hospital was. The details of that weekend are some of the most cherished, delicate, honored, raw, and beautiful moments of my life. But they are also some of the most difficult. I truly believe that the devil was at work. We aren't sharing all the details, but he tried everything he could to disrupt the union of our family, but he did not prevail. Naomi's first mom is the most strong, stoic, honorable woman that I've ever met. And with God and his perfect timing, she bestowed us with the greatest privilege of being Naomi's parents. I believe wholeheartedly that there was a spiritual battle being fought that weekend. And you know what? I had nothing to do with its outcome. No amount of strength or determination I could have mustered up myself could have ever fought that war. But God did that. God fought that battle, and boy did he win. He was sovereign over Naomi, over her first mom, and over Tim and I that weekend, just as he always had been and always will be. Remember how I changed the pictures in our profile book? Remember how our consultant told me that it would have nothing to do with the pictures I chose? Well, we later found out that because of a computer glitch, Naomi's first mom never actually saw our profile book. She only read our letter, and that's how she chose us. So the pictures that I swapped out did nothing. The control that I thought I had no effect or impact on becoming Naomi's parents. There's only one explanation for that, and that's our Heavenly Father. Those years of tears and heartbreak led us to where we are today, our little family of 3, and I wouldn't change a single thing about it. I'm so thankful that we couldn't get pregnant on our own. I'm grateful for every failed IVF procedure, and for every time we weren't chosen by an expectant mom. Why? Because every no, every failure were just little stepping stones that brought me one step closer to my daughter. I know without a doubt that God could have intervened and breathed life into my womb, but that was not his plan. His plan was better than anything I could have imagined because it was Naomi. It was always Naomi. I've known Jesus my whole life. God and I have wrestled over a few things before and worked through it. But my infertility was almost the thief of my faith. Earlier we heard Mike Todd talk about letting go of our control and allowing God to take you to a place where you can no longer depend on yourself, where you walk by faith and not by sight, where you're no longer in the shallows but deep waters. How can we be so scared of the deep, of the strong wind and the crushing waves, but not trust the one that made them? In Mark 4, all Jesus has to say is, "Peace, be still." And the winds and the waves obeyed him. I don't know what you're praying about, what your heart yearns for, what wind you're begging God to calm, or what mountain you're waiting for him to move. But my journey to motherhood, our marriage and Naomi, is all proof of God's faithfulness. Proof that God's got it, even if it's not your way, and even if it's not your timing, he's got it. A few weeks ago, I was listening to a sermon from Pastor Ben, where he talked about how in Jesus we get to have an abundant life. That as Christians, we have so much more through him. We get to live without fear because his perfect love casts out fear. Nothing can cause Jesus to die. Nothing can take power from him, because when he defeated death, he defeated every other power that there is. He is above all things. What does that mean? It means that even if our body fails, even if we don't know how we're going to put food on the table, even if your marriage is struggling, even if you're battling on addiction, even if you're waiting for a baby and the pregnancy test is always negative, he is above it all, and even if, he is still good.